I beat cancer naturally. I did it 100% plant-based, mostly cannabis extracts, but a lot of other plant-based medicine. And so prior to that, I was sick, unhealthy, overweight, alcoholic, fast food, bar food, nightlife. That was my whole identity. And so getting cancer and attacking it in the most raw way that I possibly could, the most real way that I possibly could, like transformed who I was.
What is going on? Welcome back to Jiu-Jitsu Outlet. I'm here sitting down with a blue belt, Mr. Jody Hendrix. How you doing, man? Welcome to the show.
Really well, man. Thanks for having me.
Dude, it's a pleasure. Pleasure to have you. I've loved interacting with you in the Facebook group. Jiu-Jitsu is my outlet that we have for the show. And I know that you said that you train a lot with your son and it's like really helped you guys have a better relationship. And I really want to talk about that. But before we get into that, I want to ask you the question I ask everyone, which is, how has training in jiu-jitsu impacted your mental health since you started?
Well, huge, and I'll explain how and why. Being, a veteran of the era that I was in, I was, out in the desert and experienced some ugly things that, I carried around with me for a long, long time. And for years and years and years, I used, pharmaceuticals and alcohol and rock and roll lifestyle to kind of deal with not dealing with the things that I was carrying around from, being in a combat zone. And so PTSD, hypervigilance, like ruled my life. It really ruled my world for a long time. Everything I did and everything I thought, and the way I carried myself. For me, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu has taught me that there are new solutions to old problems, and even though that doesn't necessarily have to translate verbatim to what we're doing on the mats, the philosophy does, which is no, my perceived enemies or people who would want to bring me harm aren't training to defend themselves all week long. You know what I mean? I carry with me the confidence that, the perceived dangers that could come upon me and my family. I used to carry that around, but now I can sit and I can relax knowing that we all have tools to answer those solutions if those solutions arise. So that's kind of what it's done for me personally. It's helped me live in the moment more. I'm not, I'm sure you've heard stories from veterans about restaurants, always having to have their back to the wall and be able to see the door, stuff like that. That hypervigilance for me is mostly sedated because of my training.
Dude, that's awesome. That's really great. I'd love to dive into that a little bit more. One thing that I recently interviewed the folks who wrote this book called Transforming Trauma Through Jiu-Jitsu.
Yes.
And these two wonderful women who went in and researched kind of how trauma and jiu-jitsu work together. Basically, what they found was that that trauma gets stored in your body, and that it actually gets the word that they kept using was forms. It gets stuck in these forms that it can't leave your body in, and that's why stuff like PTSD is so deliberating, because it literally is like your brain is still stuck in that moment and it can't process this thing. But what they're finding is that bilateral movement exercises like swimming or martial arts or anything where you're kind of using both sides of your brain and your body together, it has this ability to help that trauma move through. Yoga, I think, can do the same, but they're finding that grappling and martial arts are really effective at helping that trauma kind of pass through. So I'd wonder, could you talk a little bit more about what that was like when you first started training, maybe in those first 6 months? Did you enter in feeling really jittery? What was that like for you, man, when you first started?
Well, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, your first 6 months, you're in combative, so you're not even rolling yet, right? So you're just learning technique, and then you're doing a little pressure testing. And even like my brain, even in those settings, like was the beginning of fight or flight, because you're in there, you know what I mean? And you're ready. All of my responses in the military that I had to pull off to save my life were not trained responses. They were responses that I had within my body, and I reacted. You know what I mean? I didn't drop to the ground the way I was trained to drop to the ground with it. You know what I mean? It was like you went. So yeah. So for me, like that, those first 6 months of training in the combatives aspect, even was very much like. I mean, my instructors knew right away, like this guy's working through something. You know what I mean? And I don't think I was overboard about it, but they could tell. They could tell. And so after graduating the combatives course and starting, full rolling, it, had subsided a little bit only because I was aware that it needed to. So I was working on it, you know what I mean? But it took several months for me to be able to really fully relax and be in a calm, effective, calm state, So it was helpful, very helpful for that.
Dude, that's awesome. How do you feel those first 6 months kind of helped you out? Like, do you think that that's effective to not roll for 6 months?
I think so. I think it was effective because like I had a framework to work with when it came to rolling. Whereas, if I would have just had to been going my first couple days, after my first week of training, I don't think I would have had the same framework. And it also taught me to be safe in rolling, because I've learned how to do these dangerous techniques in a way that is not hurting my partner. They say we don't have to fight each other to learn to fight, and so putting a Kimura on somebody's serious business if you don't know what you're doing, and of course that. Yeah, so it was good, and I think for members of my family, it helped them stick around because they may not, in a different environment, a more like aggressive environment, may not have had the patience or the want, because who wants to go in there and get, just smashed your first day? Whereas at least with combatives, you need to frame, you need to create distance, you know the little tricks and the tools to be able to stay safe.
Yeah, I think that's good stuff. I think that's good stuff, man. At Jiu-Jitsu Outlet, I try to do kind of like a balance of sorts where the first couple months I don't really let them roll all the way, like with submissions and whatnot. I just tell them like, hey, just work on wrestling or just kind of getting to be the guy on top. Or I'll give them different positional roles, kind of like you were saying, like the stress testing. So I think you have to have that. You have to have some element of like gamification or some sort of like positional rolling or some stress testing, but just going at it full bore, like going ham, you're right. It's a good way to get injured, especially in your first couple of months. But for me, like I've found that if I just tell them like, hey, definitely you have to teach them how to fall first and make sure that they're good to go there. But then once they kind of know how to fall, I've found it's okay to have them go at it with just some basic wrestling and just try to like, hey, get a takedown, get on top, try to be the person on top, but no submissions. Because once you throw in the submissions, then the chance of injury really goes up, especially with new people, because they usually they don't know when to tap yet and stuff like that. But man, I just wanted to ask you, like, you've done a lot with Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and I know, like, we were talking about your family really likes to train with you too. Can you talk about that? Like, how has it helped your family, and how has it helped your life kind of living together as you guys train together?
Yeah. Well, my oldest son, he doesn't live with us, but we see each other quite often. But as far as, like the rest of the family, I think that, well, one, it really gives us focus on a weekly basis on family time because we're up, we're out the door, we're doing these things together. And so that's been like a super, super positive thing because when everybody has different interests outside of jujitsu, it's hard to get everybody on the same page with everybody's schedules. But because we make it a priority, it really equates for a lot of good family time. And, it makes for fun around the house too. Myself and my spouse, like we're always doing fake knife attacks on each other, and like, going for like little play takedown attempts and clinches and stuff like that. And so it's good. We all keep it at the forefront of our brains.
That's awesome, man. It's like you've incorporated play into your day-to-day life a little bit more. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. How has it helped you and your oldest son and your relationship with each other?
I think I think it's just given us something to both be into together, because I mean, 20-year difference between the two of us, it's hard to find common ground that, everybody truly enjoys, I mean, because kids don't like hanging out with their parents usually, but because of kind of what I went through pre-jujitsu, I think Jonas has seen the transformation in my life and seen that jujitsu has been a part of that. Because so we haven't said it out loud yet, but I beat cancer naturally. I did it 100% plant-based, mostly cannabis extracts, but a lot of other plant-based medicine. And so prior to that, I was sick, unhealthy, overweight, alcoholic, fast food, bar food, nightlife. That was my whole identity. And so getting cancer and attacking it in the most raw way that I possibly could, the most real way that I possibly could, like transformed who I was totally. And so now Jonas sees me as this, 46-year-old Superman, superhuman who beat cancer, and most people don't have dads in their 40s who are, training martial arts and running marathons. So I think it gives me something to give him because I'm giving him hope. I'm giving him, like courage. I'm giving him the ability to fight, the ability to stand on his own 2 feet, the ability to see somebody accomplish something. And so I don't necessarily know that I ever had those examples growing up. And so I'm glad that my travesty, the horrible, horrible things that I had to go through, have translated into such positiveness because had I not ever been diagnosed with cancer, I would have probably died of liver disease or diabetes or a heart attack. I definitely wouldn't have the life I have now, so I'm really pretty thankful for it in a weird way.
Dude, that's wild. Let's talk a little bit more about that. What sorts of cannabis extracts did you use? And I know you talked about doing it naturally. A lot of people have questions about that. Can you just dive a little bit more into like what did that treatment plan look like?
Well, I come from my dad was always anti-modern medicine. He was always an herb guy, and so when I realized what was going on with my health, I knew that I had to figure something else out. So I just started like Googling, and Google after Google after Google, I just kept landing on cannabis. And I always, had always been a pothead and always said, well, I've got glaucoma, and whatnot. But like, it was like, oh, well, what is this? How do we do this? How do I do this? And so I started researching, and there was a guy by the name of Rick Simpson who popped off, I think it was in the late 90s, early aughts in Canada. And he cured his own skin cancer with this extraction process that he found and reinvented. It's very, very simple process of soaking your bud in alcohol and then straining it and then reducing the alcohol. And you've got that extract left over. It's the most crude way to do it, but it's like extremely medicinal. Well, he cured his own skin cancer and told the world about it, and eventually had to run off to Europe, where he was to a non-extraditing country, because he was just like, he was criminalized, for what he was doing. And so when I started researching, it wasn't very long. I was in the music industry, so I kind of had friends in high places, and it wasn't long before somebody was introducing me to Rick Simpson's understudy. And he's like, dude, you come out to Colorado. He's like, I'll give you whatever you want. I'm like, you'll give me whatever I want? What is this, And I was entering into the world of patience over profit, of, like we do this to help people. It's not a money making endeavor. It's a community of sick people who pool their resources together. So I literally hitchhiked to Colorado and meet with Mike Wise, and he gives me what was supposed to be my entire treatment, if you're following the Rick Simpson protocol, right? Well, Rick Simpson's not a scientist. He's just a guy. He's a hillbilly, you know what I mean? And he's out there claiming that any cancer can be cured in 90 days with this amount of oil. And it cures a lot of people of cancer, but it doesn't cure everybody, because everybody is different and every cancer is different. And so I went out there, I made a bunch of oil, I snuck it back to an illegal state on a Greyhound, and I began treating myself. And it was wild, man. The initial stages it was like having your whole body having an allergic reaction. Before too long, I had moved to Colorado just because I couldn't access the medicine I needed in an illegal state, and it was illegal. I didn't want to go to prison. So I hightailed it to Colorado and started the process. And the process was gnarly. I was covered in tumors from head to toe, and not only was I consuming the oil edibly, but I was also covering the tumors in extract and dissolving them from the top. And so that entire process took almost 5 years. 8 holes in my body, literally. I was like walking around with open flesh wounds for years. And so during this time period, I got gnarly with my exercise and climbing hiking in the mountains and stuff like that, just to have something to grit and to grind on, and to push me through this pain that I was in every day. But yeah, it was a wild process, man. The story goes on and on and on and on and on. I could talk about different aspects of it.
Dude, that's crazy. That's crazy, yeah. Man. So that's crazy. So I'm pretty familiar with the Rick Simpson oil. Mm-hmm. I've used it a couple times. RSO, as I've always heard it called. And man, it knocks you out. It's one that you definitely take at night. At least that's been my experience with it. But it really always just knocks me out. What was that like? Did you have to take it every constantly throughout the day? Were you just always tired, or what was that like dealing with that?
Well, it was the process calls for you to keep it in your system all the time. And so in the beginning, I was just eating as much as possible, and it would knock me out pretty hardcore because my body was adjusting to it. But after my body adjusted to it, I would just take a little bit in the morning and a little bit in the afternoon. And then I would take the remainder of the large dose at night, so that I was able to go around and do the things I needed to do during the day, hike 15 miles into the mountains or whatever. But when we start talking about that, we have to start talking about the human endocannabinoid system. And so the fact that it knocks you out the way that it does means you're relatively healthy, because what's happening is your body is using the medicine that it needs, and then the rest of it is shooting straight to the dome and you're going to sleep. There was a point in time during my treatment where I was under the advice of Dr. Robert Melamede, who recently passed, but he was essentially the leading expert on the human endocannabinoid system. He's a microbiologist, And he said, like, dude, I think you need 4 to 5,000 milligrams a day. And it's like, that's so much. That's like, I mean, if you're people who are listening to this who take edibles, you know what I mean? Like, and 10 knocks you out for the night, and I'm
That's a
like
lot.
talking, yeah, yeah. But I took his advice, and as soon as I did it, um, my body lit on fire, like from the inside out. And the craziest things happened to me. From like the sensations I had in my body to what I was releasing out of my bowels. Like it was like Dr. Bob was right. I mean, and so, but to answer your original question, I did not sleep anymore, based on that, like kind of
Really?
understanding that your body is using the medicine. And don't get me wrong, I felt medicated, but I didn't necessarily feel high. And so high is what usually happens after you've been properly medicated. So,
Man, that
um,
makes sense. That
yeah,
makes sense. That's crazy, man. That's wild. So it took you 5 years to heal,
yeah, yeah,
basically.
it
But
did.
man, that's crazy. Like, okay, so would you do it again? Like, knowing that it was going to take that long, would you do it all over again, or would you try to go get chemo or something like that?
Yeah, no, I would do it. I would do it that way again. Absolutely. Because doctors weren't even on the right page of like where they thought the problems were. And, like, have you ever seen one of those, like, those kids paint by number pictures and you accidentally spill water on it and the picture pops up, right? Well, they're like wanting to poke on this tumor and deal with this tumor. But when I spilled water on the page with the cannabis oil, it was like in my lymph nodes. It was like, I mean, like it was in places they maybe would have never known. Or maybe I don't know. I don't know. I'm no expert on that, but I didn't. All I used them for was their tests, and I didn't do it until the last half.
Wow.
And, and so, yeah, so like I'm really glad that I didn't go that route.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. I've been learning a lot about this kind of stuff because I've been getting into the peptide therapy lately. I started doing the BPC 157 injections to help my shoulder because the doctors were saying I probably need some sort of a shoulder surgery. And I didn't want to do that. So I started doing the peptide injections. And man, it's helped me so much just in the last, I've been doing it now maybe like 2 weeks, maybe. And it's just like helped tremendously. And I've just been learning more about stuff like that, and it's helped me to see that like really if you do your research, you can really be your own doctor to a certain extent. And I mean, I think that's a big part of what we're supposed to be. Like, I think doctors are kind of put up on this pedestal and told that like they just whatever they say is the truth, and that's just not the case. Like, a lot of times they're doing their research on Google just the same as you or me,
Right.
and they don't know everything. Chat GPT is a gift to these guys as much as it is to you and me. Like, Chat GPT taught me how to give myself a injection of the peptide and how to do it all properly, and like how to constitute the solution and all this
Uh,
stuff. Like the whole thing, it just coached me through how to do it. And like literally I was confused by some of the instructions. So all I had to say was like, Chat GPT, explain that to me in much greater detail. And it was like, oh, okay,
yeah.
here's like, and then it gives you like for dummies guide. And so like there's so many tools out there these days. Like, even if you don't understand it, you can tell the AI, be like, hey, explain that to me like I'm a 10-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No, AI
it
is,
will, and it will.
yeah, it's
There's
great.
so
I
much.
love ChatGPT.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you should take all your medical advice from ChatGPT.
Sure.
I'm saying though that once you, like you said, use them for their testing or their diagnosis, their diagnoses and all that good stuff,
Right.
because they do have wonderful tools that can make that really easy, like blood work, and stuff like that. Like, but once you have the problem figured out, I think you should do your own research. And if they give you some medicine, like, by God, look up the side effects on Google, because they will not freaking tell you what the side
Right.
effects are. And you got to do your own research.
Well, I think that the problem comes because it's for-profit medicine, and you have the evil axis of insurance, pharmaceuticals, and then the medical training and practice. And it's like they have their own accrediting bodies, they have their own, schools of medicine, and these are the solutions that they work with. and these are the solutions they support. And they may not be the best solutions, you know, because look at how much stuff in modern medicine was found from Mother Nature. And then they took the molecules and synthesized them into pharmaceuticals. You know what I mean? Perfect example, lithium. I've been treating my own bipolar with lithium orotate. It's a natural compound that comes from the earth. No side effects. I feel like $1 million. You know what I mean? I don't get fat. I don't lose my hair. And some schmo doesn't get to go to Fiji Islands because he met his quota on me. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
it's crazy, man. Yeah, and the crazy thing is, like, they don't even know what most of the side effects are on a lot of these drugs that they give you. It's absolutely absurd. There's a documentary everyone should watch called Prescription Thugs. I think it's on Netflix, but it's all about basically the process that these drugs have to go through to get approved and why it's just so fraught with opportunities for error. And the long story short is basically just that these drug companies only have to show 3 studies that show that this drug is safe. But there's no question or investigation into how many studies were done. So they might pay for 50 studies, and in 47 of the studies, things go wrong and there's these terrible side effects. But there's 3 studies that they can take to the FDA that look pretty okay. So they take those 3 and the FDA is like, all right, good to go. But literally there's these 47 other studies where someone died or something went terribly wrong, and they just don't even have to report it. And so that's the thing, is like literally the doctors and more importantly, even the pharmaceutical companies don't even know what is wrong with these drugs. So we think of the pharmaceutical rep as this like bad guy who's out there pushing all these pills, but like the pharmaceutical rep doesn't even know what they're selling. They don't even know all the effects of this drug because of how these drugs are manufactured and tested. And that's the problem we need to fix, is like with the manufacturing. We need to go back to what you're talking about, using plants, man. These things grow out of the ground, dude.
But then the next problem is the relationships of the people between the pharmaceutical companies and the FDA, and then the magic third member, the government. You know what I mean? So you have people that served in all 3 entities. Like they might be the CEO of this company in the 2000s, and then they go over and work for the pharmaceutical industry in 2010, and then when they retire, they get a job and they run for office, and now they're in Congress. And so like then you throw the lobbyists in there who keep everybody on speed dial, and it's just a good old boy network, man. And we pay the price for it, especially in mental health, big time.
Yeah, man, you said it, dude. That is 100% what's going on. Dude, Jody, I feel like we could talk all day. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Before we wrap this up, is there anything else that you want to bring up or talk about related to like overcoming cancer or just how jiu-jitsu has helped your life?
Well, I'll throw in there self-defense jiu-jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu for PTSD. I mean, any jiu-jitsu is better than no jiu-jitsu, but I believe self-defense jiu-jitsu is where it's at for helping veterans specifically through those hard times that we carry around with us. And plus, when you're out there, somebody's going to try to punch you on the street. You got to be ready for that. You got to train for that. So that's the one thing that I feel like that I'm really amped up about right now is like is self-defense being like the focus of my training. So that, and eat healthy. Don't be afraid of weed. If you want to check out more about my story, you can look at Cannabis Health Radio. It's a podcast, and I'm episode 310. So.
Dude, that's awesome. Well, I'll put a link down to that episode in the show notes. So if you're listening, you want to learn more about Jody, go check out that interview. I'll put it down below. And I'll also just put some links where people can reach out on social media if they want to chat or say what up or anything like that. But man, thanks so much for coming on the show, Jody. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It was good to connect.
Yeah, man. Let's do it again sometime.
All right, dude. Take it easy.
Yeah, you too, man.